Alan? Okay, perfect. I think.
Okay, I need to record.
Wait, give me 1 second. Wait, I just need a red pen. Hey, Arjun, you good? Perfect. All right. You're good. Right.
Thesis, neoliberalism renders everyone an individualistic consumer rather than assuming the burden of general welfare, emergency, intervention, or public safety. The state protects capital consolidation above all, so disparate access and subordinate anomaly, free market to all politics are classical. In 1980, IMF laundered U.S. investors' risk into austerity measures in the imperial or periphery by guaranteeing U.S. investments in the states. Risk of default while forcing them to accept bailouts in exchange for neoliberalism their domestic policy. Thus, the advocacy is voted for to endorse protracted people's or solvency. One, the oppressed nation. The U.S. is the prison house of nations with black people considering one of the racial habits that requires the spatial and economic subjugation of this internal colony. Since we understand the oppression that's national in nature, the solution between national liberation, independent sovereignty, integration into established colonial stakeholds, marginalized folks into the machinery of their exploitation, material liberation requires recognizing the right to black self-determination, targeting the historical concentration of black folks into the southeastern United States and demanding sovereign culture, territorial control, destroying the base of racial capitalism, be towards mutual aid. National liberation requires organizing the mutual aid, resource conservation, and education, look to destroy people working with the LTV to reconquer land and share collective memory with their ancestral land. The 2 points black and national liberation is the strategy of constant battle or antagonism against structures of colonial state of power through partnering people's always the long state over the U.S. involves rural organizing, addressing the disenfranchised working classes, the prerequisite to any U.S. organization, populist nationalism, we lead out leftism until leftists extend compassion rather than contempt. The 2 points materialism is a mode of scientific analysis of weapons as its back. The material reality is defined and unified by conservation, but materialism which recognizes the direct relations underlie all social phenomena come first. Identity is always put into the material reality. The word is popular, the ideology is effective. The point is that only the application of revolution theory to justification of the synthesis of theory and practice can produce liberation. Our approach is physically the best way to train revolutions because of our harms analysis. Moreover, any other approach is going to fail. Practice without theory inevitably results in co-opting by neoliberal epistemic perversion. 3 warrants for the all cops are bastards or commodified to advocate for increased police funding through the unproven and empirically suspect hashtag 8 can wait reforms displacing the potential for abolition. And the other second is going to be that in the racial justice movement where victims are always deemed personally insufficient to prevent movement building. The police naming of Jacob Blake was downplayed because of his criminal charges. Plastic companies spent millions explicitly gaslighting us and believing that the plastic recycling will work despite knowing that it was unfeasible and not pollution with the links. So D, theory without practice, the accurate tower model academia focused on theory without grounding in material action leads to analysis and finding and co-option by writing forces like the objective truth of a theory is impossible to value until it is put into practice. 4, PBW and black national liberation is empirically successful and intersectional for revolutionary framework both pre and post stable and overthrow. Now, a bunch of empirics. A, the NVO was able to destroy 18 U.S. stratofortress bombers with close range tactics and beat the U.S. in Civil War. B, despite a long way driving U.S. back insurgency, FSL spelling contingente, double corn production and 2 years with segregation technology. C, Republic of New Africa demanding territorial partition and Georgia to establish a new nation model of Tanzanian socialism in the era. D is Burkina Faso Sankara completely broke the grip of the French racial capitalism and achieved massive gains in literacy, public health, and food sovereignty. E, Black Panthers vanguard, base building, saved the fire city and led to the EDA and moderate disability right movements with international cross-racial alliances from Algeria to Cuba. F, Frelimo built an autonomous revolutionary that increased literacy by factor 5 despite an ongoing civil war and achieved 90% of vaccination rates. 2, public health care. 5, endorsing Maoism and thus imperialism in the basis of rural students is key. The opponents organizing and propaganda students and teachers in schools empirically works and serves the movement. Looked how the revolutionary popular student movement in Brazil this last month organized their school stewards uniting and supporting the struggle for political power now in the countryside with the League of Poor Peasants protecting indigenous people from fascist leaders. B, rejecting xenophobia and international leftism, Western mythologization of the cultural revolution, Rascom and self-research to justify hatred of Chinese culture, meaning of the Maoist influence anti-imperialist movements that rose internationally in the 60s and 70s, always viewed with suspicion, particularly in the wake of COVID, rejecting xenophobia through accurate history of last with genuine international solidarity and counteracts other manifestations of xenophobia. C, neoliberal shaming, because the debate traditionally feeds neoliberalism, neoliberal ideological contradiction feeds the state can't distinguish the K from the CIA of diversity brand of leftism or chasers, but assumes that there is no ground truth to either, so it can't strike against our propaganda work. Harms. 1. Politics policy debate implicitly assumes that the state cares about legal actions in a Congress aspires to be a company and receives more lobbies money from than their official opposition. Their independent contractors, small legislation, the opponents, zero policy, liberal process focus politics are actively counterproductive. The CFPB is a design was 18 role, but now it serves to protect equifax from accountability because warrants for background and policy debate did not prepare to control the neoliberal drive of the state. This is an independent term to any TVA they read. Fiat does not prevent neoliberal corruption. The 2 years EU gas imports looked at how they created imperial alliance. Russia implicitly uses oil as a weapon, which in the EU cause all semi-colonies and colonies to be reliant on Russia and other forms of internal actors. 3. Is oil. Russian extraction of oil is primarily 1, 2, beat it to military conquest in Ukraine and expand to extract more, and 2, in the Arctic, which rules the environment gas. Our problem is exactly the form of merger between state and private enterprise that we could treat. Impacts. 1 is perpetual violence. Black people are not in the void of relationality but subjected to compounding violence because racial capitalism requires the continuous extraction of surplus able to function influence and low mass and look to the dog massacres using form of violence. It was not an act of metaphysical, whether by a calculated actuarial murder designed to trigger a maritime insurance claim, showing that it was a strict enforcement of property rights. The 2 is disempowerment, neoliberalism kills microeconomics by empowering capital-dominated citizens in the civic arena to policies like citizens united. The warning BLM, the focus of the movement on the individual corpse, interest with victim living and equate degradation. Social organizations have received grants of lunch by every black person in the American 300. Also, the most impactful material changes of achieved to make this year. Talk about diversity means the affirmative hard question. 3 is environment, climate change, market failure, means benefits and shared across the local. No individual actor has profit incentive to act. The corporate state is incapable of taking action even to preserve future profit. Global warming is the logic continue unchecked, causing extinction of as phytoplankton, die due to ocean acidification like the in the cloud law. Extinction, the opponents accelerated climate change for 30 years. Capitalist controls our knowledge and view how we view the world we interact in the first place means we don't know the threats that kill us. Framework. 1. Materialism comes first. The opponents racial capitalism produces race to students these of Virginia. Slave codes that were not from abstract hatred but precisely codified because of a shortage of white indentured status that threatened the material base of the tobacco economy, forcing the state to create a permanent racialized state labor pool. The B point is its root cause for state doesn't cause use more moral awakenings but uses the law to manage risk, calibrate racial violence, and protect capital accumulation caused by the Zong massacre. The C point is controls ontology. One of the mechanisms through which social and political death is naturally used through material violence. The 2 point is the material micropolitics fails. The A point is black struggle, empirical literature, Karanga's cultural us organization that focuses on individual life. That's the end. And it protests against Jim Crow. The B point is crossed by class and exxon as reason for whether for why micropolitics fails. The 3 point is social death is not real. The A point is black people have been increasing the amount of social engagement. C, the search of mutual aid and South-South cooperation proves that political structures can shift towards black agencies. 4 points methodologies. First, the A point is pragmatically encompasses questions of epistemology and ontology because purely analytical frameworks have no impact. 5, debate is key. Neoliberalism supplants political, civic, education, opportunity, civics. Classes are removed in favor of hyper neoliberal alert code. 4, for services and standardized testing. Student entry means that debate is the only space in which epistemic rupture is possible. But that window is closing. Joel Stack or NPTE with goons and back so all the high schoolers who are coming into college are going to all going to be really chopped. The 6th argument is K. Comes for T. X on warrant proves that non-production and what is fair. D. If anything, debate is unfair against R. Chaos being unfair is just a perception of leveling the playing field. K is at least on the same level because the uniqueness. Roll the ballot. Vote for the team with a vote for the best.
Endorse the political methodology.
The role of the ballot to endorse the political methodology most effective at resolving material oppression. You can crossify all the reasons for why this is better. Now, we get permutations. The A point is methods, interactions, and coalition buildings are key skills. The alternative solvency is critical. The B point is negative can win. In our model of the debate, you can write links of omissions or links from not covering enough of oppression means that the affirmative cannot be infinitely solved. The C point is the affirmative cannot win. In your model of debate, you can always read a plan plus or a truism, a plan plus or a plan plus of truism. That means that there are infinite truisms that the PMC cannot have read off in the 7-minute plan text. D is going to be that the burdens don't actually change, which is that you want this also. Don't do this for we get first. Great.
Alright. Text mode out. Okay. Roll the ballot is to endorse the political methodology most effective at resolving material oppression. Vote F to endorse protracted people's war. 2 minutes. Yeah. Buddhism. Yeah. What are these like ballot key arguments? Are you just endorsing the advocacy as a method?
Yeah, but we'll like derive external law functions, not endorsement.
Similar to how every affirmative does it.
What is this Virginia slave codes warrant?
The Virginia slave codes were enacted specifically to fracture people who otherwise would have united along class lines, because the people in charge were scared that like indentured servants and slaves would band together in class warfare.
This is gonna enter.
No fracture, yeah.
What is mutual aid?
Mutual aid is when people who are part of the working class give aid to each other, are able to build organizations that do that sorts of aid that are external to the state.
Yeah.
5 off.
Loki, give me a second too.
Let's see how much of that 5 we get. And then after in the order of alternative, framework, links, harms. What? I'll try my best. For sure.
Don't read multiple rollouts.
Yeah. Sean, good? Cool. I'll just wait for thumbs up from everyone. Who was last judge? Alan. Alan, good? Cool. Y'all good?
Yep.
Interpretation of the PMC must only derive off from the hypothetical limitation of the resolution to action by resolution of the PMC violation rather than they don't use the resolution to action 2, they use the resolution to action. Standards 1 quality over quantity, the value you get will always be worse for us because A quality you can just read truism like racism bad and then win the round, but the B point is quantity you always access pick to quality round, which means you can always just read more often so you can different steps to solve because we have to prep both the topic with Steve preps you, we can't test your applicants we can because we have to prep both the topic and also the K applicants we're throwing behind the 2 scales because the 8 points of value strategy look at how low immigration from Baltimore you stop at EBT to avoid the state would be this uniquely beneficial black panther to use non-public states, for example, look how the Black Panther used and implicated into policy making, look at how for example the Black Panther Party ran for election in Oakland and then won, which means that we're probably criminal solvency, but also the B points that Richard Lyons in the Chicago South Side used the articulation of the state to understand how the Chicago South State could solve back and which created zones of proximity. The B points creativity, yeah, rejecting the topic, rejecting state every range you can't, rejecting state every round means you can't get creativity for how to access the state. For instance, learning about like defending or attacking state balance, side of state. The C points for reflexivity, you could have just flipped neg and read your K, which means you could have solved because you got side choice for the 2 points that also reflexivity solved because we could have read your K on the app, which means we could have got the education. The points was education. By voting affirmative, people must remember your topic is not tied to a stable locus. Often we can never solve back for your office. The D points that you only see the affirmative ballot wins. You always see like you're reifying the state, which always causes people to miss from your office. With the 4 points we solve your office, the 8 points of TBA, you can just read the resolution and I define it as DIA, but 2 the absolute is bidirectional. 1 the direction is less neoliberal, so you can just pick the one that's less neoliberal. With the D is split side solved. You can just read the neg. With C points, there's only 2 ways. Absent actor and action, you presume neg because you don't have verifiable actors. Voters 1 T is a priority because they're losing before you play. But also, it's Q is evaluation. Evaluation is T because is how you do class evaluation, which is the only thing you get because structural evaluation doesn't matter. With the 2 points, also fairness comes before everything else because of the Q's evaluation. The 3 points education. With the points class education because absent education about how things work, you get mistesting with how early African settler colonialist movements evolved back into patriarchy because of the fact that they weren't able to do iterative testing with the 4 points computing interrupts reasonably absent. You get judgments and 5 points drop the debater. Next. Interpretation, the affirmative must not derive often from the method of the advocacy and the pre-fiat implications of affirmative ballot violation. They do both. They say in black standards 1 PMR shift. You get multiple types of different types of offense you can draw behind because we can't do both, which means you can't test you with the 2 points contradiction. You force us to read both fiat good and fiat bad argumentation because you get access to mechanisms and also pre-fiat implications of affirmative ballot, which means you're always typed before 2 to close, so you can never get access to your voters 1 T day prior or cross by all voters. Next. Counterplan votes affirmative to vote negative to endorse the dual power movement. 1 to solvency. 1 is space building and solvency affirmative because we work inside the state, which is nuclearly beneficial because we can access to communist revolution while working inside the state, which is nuclearly beneficial because we're able to understand policy. 2 is net benefits. There's 2 net benefits here. The 8 points that we learn about the state, which is nuclearly beneficial because we endorse policy making, which allows us to solve back with the DAs, and 2 points that also we are able to get coalition resources, which is important because it's policy for coalition building because absent working inside the state, you never get access to the levers of power like things like state power, which is always beneficial. Next, the avoids DAs. 1 point of policy making DA. Look at, for example, absent understanding of policy making, your movement classes back to killing things like, for example, how Mao's movement skill was fair. The 2 points that also it's nuclearly bad because you lose generalization because absent understanding how different groups can work in coalition, you can never solve back for understanding things like, for example, how Maoist movements got to control and then mash inside mass amounts of culture, which is nuclearly bad. Next. Cool. Next. Okay. The role of values to What do I say here?
One desires epistemically prior.
One desires absolutely prior to the 8 points that the evolution of modus act and apparition of habits, they found that happiness has no correlation with material circumstances. 2 points that what's the next one?
Material desires fail.
2 points that material desires fail. Starting from EMBO found that evolution acts to the apparition of happiness, but there was no correlation with material circumstances. 3 points that yes, literally nothing happens. You go down, it's just people sitting back there in links. The first link is that you engage in material where you are focusing on material value, which never able to step back because you are only fighting desire with more desire to get more material, which always collapses back into the crown. But the 2 points that you engage in futurism, which means you make predictions, but predictions fail because from Philip Tello found that experts were no more accurate than dark term theorem. The impacts, the active traps in some sorrow, the suffer-laden cycle, desire and regret, where we only fight desire with more desire, and this is the root cause. One is the root cause of balance. Looked at, for example, the cause of genocide and all these other things was made as material gain superseded desire to get access to the understanding of inner turmoil and peace. But the 2 points is the root cause of the affirmative violence. Looked at, for example, their claims about doing things like solving material led to things like Mao genociding sparrows and killing lots of people. The 3 points that reincarnation makes all gains non-unique. At the point at which Jim Tucker found that the only way that people could explain their past lives was through the reincarnated framework of the alternative, vote negative to endorse, alternative, moo. 1, moo is occurring affirming you have not without, which means that we can solve back for your entire 1AC proper by unasking the question. 2 is that dualism solve the F value of the K is a floating pig, which is able to solve the F absent dualistic question. 3 points that dualism comes prior to capital. Look at, for example, the question of how capital functions is the question of the dialectic, which means that we always come back for solving the dialectic root proper. The 4 points no perms, the 8 points that perms are asking the question, which means you can never solve back for. The 2 points that the 2 points that perms in method base means that you can always read the smallest possible F, and you can never affect it all offense because you can just say the smallest thing. Also 3 is that you could just read the F and also endorse moo, which means that we are terminal solvency deficit, right? Mm-hmm. Cool. Go to the K. In 1978, in 1781, the crew of the slave ship Zong threw over 42 black bodies and insurance claims because the crowd was too bad. The next 10 days, slaves jumped out of the ship in active defiance. In 2026, Johnny Collins 3, Summer McRae, and Skylar Worthing drowned in the river 20 miles from the campus. Black people weren't taught how to swim. I believe they're still alive. The oxygen flows and potassium streams. Black life is the most proximal, portable, and tangible impact of your battle. Framework is the analysis of black vicissitude and the unwelcome change of fortune. 1, the middle class was ontology that cast the black bodies in unintelligible ontological category. 8 is the project of humanism, which is found in the society of large need of negation to make itself coherent because boundaries and negation to make itself coherent. The big point is the ontological event transformers from African to black. A is the fungible position that stripped the black body of land, futurity, and sovereignty in history are the key tenets of ontologizing. 2, the black body is truly not unique and a position of unintelligibility. The 8 points times down the trapped in ontological claims we can never get back. Look at, for example, the removal of the look, for example, how abolishment of slavery still led to 1 in 3 black men being locked up, and the B points are no analog. The affirming of the black bodies truly not unique creates a psych construct of humanism, which means they can never be compared to any other race. 3 C points that you the fiat underclass moving a white civil society always requires the underclass to cause the black body to be left behind. Look at, for example, the perpetuation of progress led to the Tuskegee Institute, where the white body scratches the scientific labor from the black body even post capital. And D is no worlds, metaphysical and sports of society. Haitian slave rebellions and communist revolutions changed the ontology but could not cause formation, which is why Trump still says things like eating dogs is good and the Haitians eat dog. And 3 said overcoats all registers. The 8 points of materialism, the only mechanism of one mechanism to enforce. Look at, for example, Black Wall Street got burned down, which means that even material gains can't supersede. But the B points that person all the registers above, like semiotics, like overcoding the hair that we have, or the E points of epistemology, how black labor is seen as unknowledgeable because they speak AAVE, which means you can never get there. White civil society positions the black body is politically dead, which the state is being irretrievable, including from the political order. The only recourse for blackness is to live a reasonable social life with black subject recognizes themselves as subject and cultivates internal relations from unintelligible form outside the political. The role of balance for the best method that creates the erosion of black solidarity. 1 harms. You and gain material focus, which always fractures the black body by claiming that material gains can supersede. Look at, for example, the black wall should end up getting burned down with the 2 points. You can never solve back for the ontology because you saying that all of ontology can solve by PPW, which means that you can always fracture movement. Look at, for example, the Harry Haywood got fractured. Your movement got fractured, like for example, Harry Haywood's fractured the CPUSA because of the fact that they were split around race lines, which means you fracture a movement, which means you were focused on material that never solves. The impact is vicissitude, the change of changeability. The black body stripped of all subjectivity and made meaningless single value. It's perceptual and fungible distance means that we're stripped of all kinship and ties. 1 is defines all the movements. 8 points defines capital. Look at, for example, the fracturing of the CPUSA was caused by the splitting along race lines with 2 points reverse cause, low-term miscegenation laws for use to shape anti-gay mayors laws, and 3 is the root cause because other races define themselves as blackness. Next, the advocacy of vicissitude. 1 vicissitude is the unexpected change in life. The treachery of black lives is the emphasis of left death over and over again. 8 vicissitude is the namesake of the sculpture that was displaying the black body sculpted stone at the bottom of the ocean in the coast of Grenada. The B point is absolute nothing rather than relative nothingness of the white society who assumes we hold the pathological impossible that we refuse to move towards absolute nothing. 2 in the face of fungibility, the black body refuses to engage in white civil society and culture to the end. The 8 points at Igbo landing in 1803, African half took a hold of the ship and jumped over. 2 is lysis. Vicissitude contributes to lysis of morbid universal total reconstruction of blackness. 3 is that subtraction is not pessimistic. The 8 points that sovereign communities by recognizing shared political debt and acting simultaneously, we create essence fugitive that gives us value, but also no perms because you engage in white society back and from in us. Go to the alt. All 1, the state questions are moving to heart. For example, all your mouths moving to crush with the viewpoints that leads to right-wing backlash. For example, the Republicans just get mad. You go on mutual aid. No, it's bad because it fractures the working class because it forces us to be in league with the like Republicans, which is usually bad. Go to the examples. 1 we're saying no, your Stratford bombers actually ended up bombing black bodies in Africa, which we never saw. But also your double turns about Republican youth activists from Burkina Faso were always crushed by the state because they're still tapped by that. But the black Panthers got crushed by the state. Go to your state crushes. We're saying that 1 on roasting mouths and 1 no, the state crushes. Also, Bolsonaro has killed your movement right now, so you can never solve. Go to the harms. Relink, you engage in ballot liberation where you look at the you engage in capital, which means you always engage in blackness, but also on your harms. No, you can never explain why there's political death. You only talk about socialism, which you never solve. Go to the harms. Go to the framework. Materialism is wrong. On the Zong massacre, you can never explain why the black body was usually one that was overthrown off the Korean body, which is why the Zong massacre was occurred to blackness. But on racial codes, no, it only was overcoded by the blackness, which resemble the other groups that were not fractured, like the intentional services. But no, we don't control your ontology. Look at, for example, the black body ontology overcodes all of your actions. But also, no, we get perms. The 8 points that it fractures movements when you do I permutations are also equally bad. Okay, I'm out of time. Cool.
Yes. Here, we can just. Here, actually, let's just do animation. You get K, I get 3.
K. Oh wait, we have more. We have more text. Don't. What are you getting?
I'm getting just the interps.
Okay, I'll get the other K.
Roll a ballot, alt. Do you the counter plan?
Oh, I have I read a counter plan. Endorse dual power.
Oh, you only heard one roll time?
Yep.
Okay, cool. That's it. Oh, interns. Cool, should we read them?
Yeah.
Alright, let's start. Status of everything.
The status quo is always an option.
So you can kick them.
Yeah.
Can you go for multiple counterplans simultaneously?
If they don't contradict, yeah.
Okay. Do you get access to the world of both? Or only the world individually?
The world of both, right?
Okay.
The world
Can I
individually.
get a list of the TBAs?
The TVA is just the res. We say that either A, you can defend DDev, or B, you can, it's a bidirectional half, so just pick the less neoliberal one. Also, I'm changing my answer. We're only going for one advocacy.
Sorry, what?
We're only going for one advocacy. We can only go for one advocacy. We can only go for one counter advocacy.
Oh, okay. So those are the only TBAs?
Yes.
Okay, so just like, and can you, that means perms everywhere, okay.
And also be aware that they conditionally depend. What happens after dual power? Okay, who's done it before?
After the stake,
Okay,
it's
cool. On the impact, do you experience some sorrow right now?
no.
You don't experience.
Oh wait, yes, I do. Yes.
Sorry, how does your alt solve on anti-blockness?
It resolves the dualism that the dialectic is based on for
What's the
anti-blackness.
question?
What?
What's the question?
What question?
Question.
The question of
The task posed by the
the
resolution?
task posed by the alternative.
Oh, yeah, the advocacy.
Sorry, do you plan to resolve cap on your alt?
Which alt?
The second one?
Yes.
How?
Capitalism depends on the exploitation of black labor.
Okay.
So you solve black labor? Like black
We
people don't
end
work
white
anymore?
civil society.
You end white civil society.
Yes.
Okay, that's it. Cool.
Half an hour, second order.
Oh, shoot. I'm so sorry. Can you, I have it all in different orders. It's framework,
It's
Pre-post.
Alt, harms, impacts, framework. Yeah.
uh-huh. And the two interps, and then dual power, and then Buddhism, And then, sounds good.
Everyone ready?
Yeah.
Now, on the internet, they tell you the math can get across the cycle. We tell you you can send all the empirical policy words that we don't know. So you can simply send like the Zikar word and Burkina Faso ones that didn't correspond instantly. Even if we do correct, we still create good material changes in the meantime, which means that we're the internally performed. But say they tell you the right way backlash. After first of all, your form of backlash is always going to be the worst because because we are like more coalitional and not less focused on our backlash. But instantly we tell you that material aid is something that right wingers all focus on. And that's why you look at how everyone wants to resolve poverty and status quo. They say that we leave with Republicans that mutually simply resolve. Back for the racism, we'll get to the CPA to USA stuff later. They say that we bomb Black people Africa. No, we always you can extend the mutual aid and solidarity war. That's how we simply reach out to people like Nigeria and Cuba. Then also you can extend they say multi-racial movement who we are, specifically in Brazil and stuff. We can extend the U.S. also here. They say that we engage in ballot liberation. First of all, no, we don't. We just defend the ballot method passing, which means that we have a broader liberation for the broader method for the debate space. I.e., that is where the solvency comes from. They say that we only talk about social justice. No, they say that we only talk about social justice. So we say the social justice is probably the only first of all, it's going to have political justice. Probably not. Their political justice is not true. No, then so in stuff you can the Black Panther Award as how and all the empirical solvency awards have people are Black people are able to engage in the political and status quo, which means that the affirmative is also going to be survival authority through which we can resolve for Black life and status quo because engaging in liberatory practice, even if that practice eventually fails, it's still going to give us back to then you extend how that the rest of the empirical solvency awards has they have the basis of growth laws to make these you can extend student organizing so they're going to be the only internally solving in the round also our rejecting status quo is also the internally to ensure
Clear?
the we or the internally to you also you can have the state cannot distinguish the K from TA elections of internal to base space, which means that the state can also process specifically in debate even if it can't criticize external to it. Then you can harm then you can the impacts of how racial capitalism always is going to reproduce racial violence and how specifically the Zorg massacre specifically in order to trigger maritime insurance claims, which means that racial violence is inevitable under capitalism. Then you can disempower between their civic methods that advocacies fail because they're individualists, but also you can tell the environment as how everyone's going to do extinct and the status quo and the plastic wars on the family. Then you can tell the materialism is also going to come first, which means that we are specifically extend that identity is always focused filtered through materiality is the public ideology the fact that the people get propaganda against their alternative as the something different they say that we can't put back into we can other groups work pressure by industrial servitude and also you can extend the current cultural US organization that focuses on individual life that was pro Jim Crow, which independently means that you reproduce your impact, but independently you just extend how we extend blackness. Also you extend the social justice, not real and status quo, how political engagement is increasing in status quo food. Their piece is also you can extend the debate is uniquely key and they don't get access to permutation. You can extend they can win under our framework, but we can't win under your framework. And the method interaction is always going to be the internally affordable impacts. Then you extend that we are on the same layer as theory. Let's go to theory on affirmative. One is going to be counter-interpretation for the one thing must be people don't like counter-interpretation. The one is may affirm topically or counter-rejection and liberalism. First is going to be counter-standards. First counter-standards is going to be affirmative. We take a KPK debate is always going to be uniquely key to math. This has to be the only way that we can get actually practice, which is the solvency for a second. Second is going to be could auto lose because the state is bad. You can extend the after because the reason why the affirmative would always lose them in there. And their one should be terminally unfair and also not producing representations for the second. So the content mastery, which is repeated for affirmation of the same resolution builds content mastery, which is one good for accessibility because people don't need access to backfile, but secondarily so we get access more access to depth of education. Threes and the affirmative flexibility is always going to be key to negative against the lecture strategy after you get into equals one control and conditional advocacy conception can touch with the alpha will be just 7 minutes because we know what the one is you and also the affirmative has to engage in resolution analysis where they don't machine that we which is always better prepared is on their line first to go no you get they take quality over quantity no you get submission is conceded for the permutation debate which definitely means that they get access to quality ground they say that they can't have but first of all they debate us in practice they debate us in practice which means that they can't treat us independently you should have easy no to great deal liberally rather than finals every time that they show you survival strategy first to go into the debate your forms of strategy or strategies are rapidly generated depends on the state look how people become trapped in welfare they say the Black Panther grant for election they would not have won with that constructed without the collective struggle outside because they were the Black Panther Party which means that the material support that the Black Panthers were able to garner for people running for election in the first place is always going to be a prior question they say creativity yes we can do creativity we can read different topic cards every round which means that we gain access to your education standards they say that we can flip negative first of all no we can't because KBK debate is unique key also we didn't know the topic before flip negative because we wrote our own topic they say TBA because we read the resolution as data first of all no that's going to be a DLC state itself is never going to collapse itself because there's no portable advocacy for advocating for the state to collapse the money you can just extend the first link as a reason why this is never going to fail also they say you can pick the less neoliberal one but the first link also applies to both also it's not bi-directional it's just always in the direction of more oil production and independently it just doesn't include the action of the affirmative in the TVA never solves back there's no after action yes there is the global proletariat does project people who are working the weak they'll have access to solvency also there's going to be risk of solvency either way because we're just going to be decentralized which is good they say that it's going to evolve back to patriarchy first of all practice falls back for this you can extend the repeated iteration of the alternative always going to be uniquely key okay let's go on to the next slide.
Counter-interpretation, the affirmative may derive often from the method of the accuracy and the PPL implications of an app. Valid counter-terms, one assuming that this is inevitable. We tell you that getting access to the PPL implications is always true because the app just has to read an underview, which is PPL, after the affirmative also lists the PPL implications from the negative because PPL is illusory, which means that PPL good is always, we require for your PPL implication to win a PPL, that PPL is good in the first place, which means that we have to get access to PPL implication. The second is just this is always going to be uniquely good for education because the PPL implications are just like portable and like it's more stuff. They tell you that we get access to two different ways, so often we just get this either way because we just read, for example, like contradictory frameworks, or we can just like read two different advantages between. Then you can just like bind us one by reading arguments that PPL or COSIO matters more on the counterplan. Perm do the app, perm do both. They say that you can work with them. Say we do that, we run the black counterparty, which means that we solve this independently. You need to know where you are going, which is the solvency up to the counterplan, because they just say dual power, but they don't know what is the state of the building in the future. They say that they can engage with the policy. First of all, we can do that too. We create the state and that's which means that the only productive method of engaging with the state is through critiquing. You can some top terms the reason for this. Also, all of our state fails warrants and specifically the CFPB warrant as a reason why no portable impacts ever get generated. The map tells us we take the practice of specifically check back for this via material analysis on that top. They are wrong. Food is material. Affect is also material. You can become passive, public, polar, absolutely, neoliberalism, all generate more desire, and also that desire is inevitable because like desire is because hunger is physically material. They also know caused by the role about the field is not illusory. External role about the frames of the mat. Also, reading they specifically desire things by reading, which are advocacy between the links are always getting symmetrical on the impacts. First of all, it's not true that depth of material also reincarnation is not true. It's not possible. Also, extinction takes it out because there's nothing to reincarnate into other alternative. Perm do both. Perm don't find the alternative can resolve back for the link which are linked to the or the alternative can resolve the status quo. Also, perm do the negative. The separate perm the separate perm is justified. The separate perm is justified by the existence of relinks between the we get server out of the affirmative. They get server out of their other advocacies. Also, they don't solve because useful desire arguments to be true in the first place. Also, they don't solve because hunger just regenerates desire, meaning that the alternative solves the app solves the negative by allowing people to say their material desires, but not by vice versa. You accept the role of valid. Also, they tell on policy. First of all, you can limit identity is always filtered through materiality. Also, that there are no impacts. Also, you can accept that blackness is materially constructed. You can send all the work from the TMCS. Why this is true as the slave codes and also the what are the other ones? Whatever. The on time being on another no, but time is linear. First of all, first of all, the progression of place society 2, feudal society 2, capital improve the time linear, the side progressive from the drive of productive forces and super interchangeable debates. You can the words from the affirmative. You can't do things so static because the real rule will always outpace you. But second, the essentialization, the blackness is not ground zero for all of the forms of repression. There are differences in social death progressing from Atlantic slavery to Jim Crow to Obama. I.e., 1/3 of black people being in prison is better than everyone being enslaved, which independently improves. Is more for us. Is literally progress. Also, there are other forms of repression which indigenous people also, even if they're not compared, can still weigh them. I.e., all effects are possible to someone. Also, it does not overcode material because race is also going to be used to useful capitalism. I.e., break capitalism regenerates race and crushes Black Wall Street because they want to impose anti-blackness, but that's always the result of capitalism on their alternative. First perm to both crossed by the frontal body, also this crossed by the seventh perm to the neck. Also, we take capitalism does not rely upon black labor. It just displaces it onto someone else, which means that they can never add enough to society because someone else just becomes the labor. Also, they don't resolve the central contradiction, which is the class contradiction between the material source. Also, you can also Liberia, look at how like black people liberate black people oppress indigenous people in Liberia, which means that they don't resolve for anti-blackness.
Yeah, counters.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh wait, let's read this.
Oh no, I wanted the May one on the second.
This is May. Right?
No, on the second one too.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Counter-interpret the app must defend PPW. Counter-interpret the app may from the topical or defended rejection of neoliberalism. Counter-interpret the app may derive. Yeah.
Can I get the perms as well?
Oh yeah, perm do both, perm do the neg on.
Perm do the app on dual power.
And what
Perm-
about on the K, on the second
Okay,
K?
I'll
Perm do both right side.
Wait, you're right. Just
Did you just tell me? Okay.
yeah, you can just tell me. Just
okay.
on anti-blackness.
Oh, on anti-blackness, it's perm do both, perm do the neg.
Okay. I will start. Oh wait, real quick. What's the second to last? The thing you read right before Liberia. Second to last response.
Cap does not only depend on black labor. You don't resolve the central dualism with the class.
Okay.
Class depend on black labor, right? Yeah. On Liberia, no, they're part of the white civil society. Okay, I want you to say defense on Mao. One, Mao comes barrels, not praxis. That's still praxis. Mao gives praxis kernel defense. Two, I need to say that example get crushed. The Stratford bomber used the bomb. But also still death traps. On the one hand, Stratford bombers are still collapsing and everything like that. Stratford bombers used to bomb Africa, Burkina Faso, trapped. We control global uniqueness, right? Okay, now the ontology debate you have, right? Interiority plus okay. The only other thing is that CPU is a fracture on relational. Yes. Control the internal integrity, right? And we solve PPW because we collapse white civil society. Yes. And then also it weighs social life as the impact about how we filter all impacts, right? Yeah. Right.
Okay. All right. Order is going to be overview. T framework. Pre-post fiat. Dual power. Buddhism.
Is that the desire one?
Yes. The framework debate. I'll put them together. And then it'll be the alt, the impacts, the alts of the K, the framework.
Wait, framework again?
Sorry. Just the solvency of the F. I might change my order on the Ks. I will give you pen time. Huh? Yeah, sorry. Overview, T framework, pre-post fiat, dual power, Buddhism, and then it'll go the where's my and then it'll go neg framework, AF framework, the impacts and alt of the K, and then the solvency of the F. Yes. Okay. Are we good? You are getting the anti-blackness via cap debate that you want to. You can see a lot of key things. The first argument is that you make the concession that the negation of the human is always going to be the explanatory power for all of your arguments, specifically about capitalism. But more importantly, we tell you that our solvency is always going to be key for your solvency, because you can see the Henry Haywood argument that specifically says that you're always going to be fracturing unless you focus on race. And so far as that is true, you are also conceding that we literally collapse white civil society, so we solve for the entirety of the affirmative. You're going to be voting for the K. Let's start on the answer. We're going to be conceding the counter-interpretation. There's no residual offense here on the second answer. We're going to be conceding the counter-interpretation. There's no residual offense here on dual power. We're going to be considering a permutation do both on the K. Sorry, on Buddhism. On Buddhism, we'll also concede the permutation. There's not going to be that's going to shield out any of the relinks. They say that we will also concede that things are non-falsifiable, which means that the relinks don't necessarily matter. And insofar as we say that political is always going to be the most important thing in the round, it doesn't necessarily matter. On the K. I'm going to extend the framework. I'm going to extend the first argument that the middle passage is always going to be what's going to be claiming everything. There's going to be a really important ontology versus materialism debate, but we are very ahead. You just make arguments about how materialism shapes the reality. Even if materialism shapes the reality, we're the explanatory power for how the materialism gets there in the first place. We specifically say that the needing of a negation for a human is why the ontological category of the black body exists in the first place. This happened through the middle passage. Insofar as this is true, this means that the black body is always being posited as the negation of the human. This means a few things. First, this means that this is the explanatory power for all of your violence. You make the concession that this is the reason why there's no analog for the black body, and why all violence is specifically justified because of the black body. This is really important because this means that all violence under capitalism is also justified, which means that if we solve for the alternative, we're going to be able to solve for the affirmative. The second reason why this is going to be important is because this is what shapes the material reality in the first place. The reason why capitalism exists in the first place is specifically because of the black body. The third argument is that we are winning on the reverse cost question. You do not do enough work on the black Wall Street question. We tell you that when you had capitalism, when you had the black body be able to experience capitalism and able to get to the same material position, you still got to burn down. You say that capitalism capitalism, what specifically explains it. But the problem is that this is not necessarily true, because we literally tell you that the material gains through capitalism are exactly the same between the black body and the white body, but the black body was one that was able to be burned down. You also made the concession there's specific violence that you were not able to explain for. You can see the semiotic and epistemic violence that happens specifically because of the ontology, which means that even if you win the materialism controls question of ontology, we say, A, this is clearly not true because you do not solve back from the negation issue, but B, and more importantly, there's violence that materialism is not able to explain. For example, the texture of Arjun's hair, but there is specific things that ontology is able to explain, which means that ontology is always going to be the best worldview for the way that you evaluate violence in the first place. You always need to evaluate ontology.
Then AAVE is the reason why archaic semiotically comes first.
You can also explain why AAV is specifically why ontology comes first when it comes to semiotics.
Right, like we use like semiotic violence like this in the post-material world.
Yes. So this also means that semiotic violence still exists in a post-material world, which means that your advocacy is not going to be able to solve back, which means that your permutation does not function on the responses. You make arguments about how material construction is really important and still leads to essentialization. You make arguments about slave codes, but the problem is that the reason why that stuff exists in the first place is specifically ontology already did the work there. They say there's
land futurity.
We also tell you that specifically the ontological status of the black body is what stripped the black body away from the land sovereignty, futurity, and and history. Insofar as that is true, we specifically tell you that those four things are specifically what created the ontological change that materialism didn't necessarily do, which means you do not have root cause.
Things aren't material.
Yeah, these things are also not necessarily material, which means materialism does not shape the function of ontology, which means that your slave codes argument isn't necessarily true. We are also going to say your argument about progression from slavery to feudalism to 1 in 3 black bodies is not necessarily true when it comes to the impacts. Even if you see material gains, there's going to be a few problems. First, you make the concession that time is always going to be nonlinear. Insofar as this is true, even if you do have some kind of material gains, it is never going to be able to get to the same as civil society. But secondly, and more importantly, we tell you that the most important impact in the round is going to be political death, and the black body cannot access that specifically because of the ontology, which means even if you prove that yes, progression in society does make the black body have more material gains, it doesn't necessarily matter because A, it gets burned down because the Black Wall Street war, but B, more importantly, the most important impact in the round is specifically ontological violence, which you are not able to solve back for.
You know, it's 1 in 3. There's still like mass surveillance and mass incarceration.
There are still things like mass surveillance and mass incarceration, which means that we're still going to be able to solve back for this kind of violence, which ends up going into materialism as well. You say that indigenous oppression happens. We're going to say that this is not necessarily going to be true for a few reasons. Well, this is true, but it's not exactly the same for a few reasons. One, you make the concession this is specifically because the negation of the black body is specifically defined in terms of blackness. Secondly, we would say that the violence is always going to be uniquely different because the indigenous body is not necessarily politically dead.
Defined in terms of blackness, the mestizos are defined in terms of
the mestizos are defined in terms of the negros, which means that this is not necessarily true. But secondly, and more importantly, we also tell you that the indigenous are not necessarily politically dead. You literally have like indigenous tribes able to make deals with like United States federal government and get like land like recognized. Like it's definitely significantly different. You also say that capitalism regenerates things like race. Yeah, we already responded to this. Okay, go to the framework. What do I extend on here?
On the framework, extend 1. Go to the extension. Say that you can't extend things like the Zong massacre, like why it didn't happen to Koreans, for instance, in Korean slavery.
Okay. I mean, you extend the Zong massacre argument. You make the concession that this is you are not able to explain why Korean slavery didn't necessarily lead to the same political death that you talk about. Insofar as this is true, even if identity is things that are propagandized, it doesn't necessarily matter because the identity is always going to be propagandized in different ways, which means that we were the only side that can create solvency for this. You also say that we are reproducing our impacts, but the problem is that our alternative is just going to be able to solve it, which I'm going to get to later.
You also say that the black body, like the slave codes were about black people, which is why like the other race groups don't fracture. Slave codes are about black people.
Yes, you also can see that slave codes are specifically about black people, which means that you are the
like Irish versus like Barbados indentured servants.
Irish versus Barbados indentured servants are significantly different. Okay, the next argument that we're going to be extending is this argument of the framework. We specifically tell you that material efforts are always going to be failing if you are not prioritizing blackness. This is the argument about Harry Haywood. We say the CPUSA movement always fracture, which is going to be terminal defense to your alternative, which means the only way the affirm could potentially solve back is with the permutation, but we're going to prove that you do not get that. Yeah, okay, good alt. I want you to extend the alternative. We tell you, I want you to extend the alternative vicissitudes. The vicissitudes, specifically the unexpected change in life, is going to create a few pieces of solvency. The first argument is that you make the concession this is literally getting rid of white civil society, which we entirely sold back for capitalism. We entirely sold back for the affirmative. More importantly, we tell you that we resolve for the most important impacts in the round, which is going to be political death. We tell you that subtraction is not necessarily pessimistic, but a form of creating a social life. Insofar as this is true, then social life living among political death means that A, you are unintelligible, which your responses are are unintelligible because you do not understand the specificities of the alternative, which gets out of all these specific arguments. The second argument is that your arguments are not necessarily true. You say it's displacing labor on someone else, but that the labor that's displaced on someone else is not necessarily reliant on the negation because you do not create the same ontological status on the black body. You say it collapses into dualism, but we also tell you that this is not necessarily true because the specific creation of the black body is why the negation exists in the first place. Your Liberia argument is also not necessarily true because it's still relied on white civil society. If we saw back for white civil society, we get rid of all of these things because there's no white civil society because you can see that white civil society specifically relies on black labor and
Go to their alt.
okay, on their own.
Extend
Oh wait, on the perms. We're going to say that you're not going to be evaluating permutations. We're going to extend all the arguments that we say about why permutation doing both aren't necessarily true. Permutation doing the negative is also not true because it's going to be really unfair if the opponent is going to be able to kick out of things. You do not read a relink on this argument, so it's not necessarily true. But more importantly, you can see that you cannot do permutations in a method space specifically because you can read the smallest app possible. It's always going to be bad for fairness. You read a lot of reasons why you are able to get access to permutations, but the problem is that you can win in our framework. You can just say that you're best for anti-blacks on the law.
Stratiforce Belmers and all the other warrants about how they say crushes.
You can extend the Stratiforce argument and all the other warrants about white state crushes.
Extend the Mao Sparrows thing, practice and so back for because Mao engaged in practice.
You also can see that Mao doesn't engage in
Mao
practice.
killed the sparrows and he engaged in practice.
Mao killed the sparrows. He engaged in practice. Arden's gonna do it.
Alts, framing, impacts, or sorry, framing, alts, impacts. Fade the framework real quick. It does not matter who wins framework if we say that alt is not solved. We're going to say that alt is not solved for two separate reasons. The one point is that they've conceded that the CPUSA and all other PPW movements have fractured because on the line of the race question. This is going to be a complete terminal defense and also a preconceived question of why you put our alt first. One, they've conceded that absent any question of the race analysis, their CPUSA movement individually fractured under the defense of hero. That's cold conceded from our impact section, which means it's terminal defense for the 1AC. It does not matter if they win frame about material claims. It does not matter if they win impacts about harms. It just does not matter because the race question always supersedes the capital question. That's cold conceded. Two, they've also conceded complete no solvency on the Mao Sparrows question, engaged in the fact that Mao engaged in praxis because Mao was a part of their PPW movement and still killed all the sparrows, which led to Moscow famine, which means that even if you can't solve the race question, you definitely can't solve the...
I'll say the implication that the Mao killed the sparrows led to large-scale famine is new. There was no impact before.
We say that killing... we say that like this it was impacted out to famine in the MG. It's not extending the MO, but we are extending the MG extension.
We also say there's also a question of solvency, the impact doesn't necessarily matter.
Panel. Which means it's probably terminal defense to side constraints on material action as well. You can't solve back for these ontology claims, but probably it's also defense that this is still a bad policy action if you don't think it leads to famine, which means that Mao still can't solve for good policy actions, which means that praxis definitely cannot solve. The 3 points, the Stratiforce bombers and the Burkina Faso warrants, these are the extensions of the BPP and all these things are the thing, but they've conceded a few separate articulations to give. We said that one, even though you have Stratiforce bombers, then went into bombed Africa, which means that we are controlling global uniqueness, that white civil society has no analog and always approaches itself in a metaphysical way where it always recreates itself, which means that even PPW absent, like even say you solve PPW, you don't solve white civil society. That recreation PPW and the fact that it bombs Africa, BP Panther gets failed, all means state crushes movement, you can't solve back for the things that we're solving. Alt is gone. Does not matter. Go to our alt. The only defense they have on our alt is the Liberia question, but the Liberia question is always implicated in terms of white society because Liberia needed aid from white society to stay afloat, which means your defense is always predicated on the fact that we don't solve back for white society, which you've conceded 100% solvency that we have solved back for white society. This is twofold. The one point is that we are literally putting ourselves in the bottom of the ocean, which collapses white society because it requires an fungible class of people. That's what vicissitude means, which means that we are removing this fungible class of labor, which means that we can always solve back for white society. Now, you've also conceded the fact that white society and the fungible labor question shapes all impacts around. The one point is that the fungible society shapes how the class works. I look for the fact that the black body which requires the fungible labor class to enable capitalism, which means we always solve back for capitalism here. But the 2 points we solve back for other races as well, because you can see the articulation that the mestizos were defined in terms of the negros and all the other indigenous questions you have are always defined in terms of the racial questions. You always solve back for racial questions. Even if you concede that the race exists post capital, we get rid of race, which means you always solve back for us. Turn their words against them. They say race exists post capital, race gets collapsed post our alternative, which means that we are the triad for solving, which means you're probably a sequencing question here. Now, on the permutation debate, you conceded our permutation space about how you could have just read us on the affirmative, which means you probably should have the negative, but also too, least having a small methodology, which means you're bad on fairness, but you're also bad on the permutation debate, because at the point which we proved that PPW is anti-black because it always one fraction of movements that engages in the collapsing, it probably means you never get any solvency here, which means you can't do perms. Cool? Go to framing. The framing question does not matter. We're going to win both. But I want you to do extensions on time frame right here. Imagine we have 100% solvency. What you vote for is who gives you best value of life in the middle of that time frame question. I.e., if we both have 100% solvency, which we don't, we have the question about who gets the time frame.
Political death buying as well.
Yeah. So one, we went on political death because we saw back for politics because you can never engage in the politics of race post-cap. Two is that we also give more value of life in the meantime because you've conceded the fact that the ontology of the black body was socially dead or socially alive at the point at which we removed from all history and past sovereignty. We said that this is most important because our access of solvency, of getting access to community building and understanding our ancestors is always going to outweigh on a question of time frame because in the meantime of getting the solvency that they have, we get value of life in the meantime, which probably always truly benefits them. They said that their only value of life is occurring from the fact that, rebelling against movements doesn't matter. But the problem is you can see the fact that black bodies can't rebel against movements because we don't have access to futurity and past, which means that we're the only ones solving for these value of life claims about how we're solving back for them. Go to the framing claims. The framing claims were head-on for a few different reasons. One point is they can win all the material claims, and it does not matter because they concede the fact that ontology encodes all other forms of balance as well. Conceded on semiotics means that even post-material societies, you still engage in semiotic racism like AAVE and epistemological racism like AAVE seeing is done, which means we always upload the K because we have reasons about why ontology can overcome other registers as well. But the 2 points that ontology was defined in terms of a movement, not just for capital, but also for other things. So for example, the erasure of futurity, like past and sovereignty have no impact of capital, which means we always explain. The slave codes warrants they give you are always tied to blackness. It was black slaves that were coded away, and the Zong massacre is unique to blackness. It never happened in Korean slavery, which means their implications don't link. It's blackness is the root issue.
Okay, so I gave you the answer for when. I gave you the answer for when. You could also say this because I think this is confusing. Yeah, I need to do one thing.
I think they also have terminal defense. Wait, I just like jobs. Maybe it's like over. I think it is. Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Order is going to be Olivia on top, and it'll be the F and the F solvency, and it'll be the alternative with the permutation, then it'll be the framework, the impacts, and then, framework, and then the impacts, I guess. Yeah. You give me more weight. Cool. Is anyone not ready?
The overview to the surroundings that they're making infinite totalizing claims, but any single counterexample is going to disprove all their claims. Capitalism is the root cause or alternative cause to every single impact that they are going for in the block and does not depend on black labor. Key concession in the round means that they do not solve for capitalism from the alternative, means that only the risk of solving capitalism is going to win us the round. Now, it also means that you cannot solve for the white civil society due to other fracturing things like Liberia. It means that you have no external solvency in this round. Now, go to the affirmative. We're going to extend a bunch of solvency reasons for why we are able to solve. They have only one argument against this, which is Harry Haywood, and no other argument, which is that all of our empirics are just going to outweigh just based on strength of link. You can extend the SGA. The only thing they said that they bombing elsewhere, but no, that does not prove the other warrant that we were able to beat the United States in Vietnam. Second, you can extend all of these specific warrants about black people, about Burkina Faso, Black Panthers, and Frelimo. All of these are specific to a black agency and how they were able to solve, which is that even if you have one example in the United States, we at least have international solidarity elsewhere, which is that we can still beat capitalism internationally. That means that we have a higher strength of link on being able to solve back for this. To prefer empirics, so you can make it the number of people that would die in a generic genocide, but you can't make it the number of people that would die in the Holocaust, which is that our empirics are just going to outweigh because all of their alternative solvency is based on intelligibility. But you do not know how to evaluate this, but you do know how to evaluate the empirics debate on the affirmative. It means that the affirmative has 100% solvency for capitalism, and thus the downstream impacts of racial violence against black people, and also the external impacts of climate change and extinction means that we are just going to straight outweigh. Now we'll go to the empirics debate. First is going to be that of Harry Haywood. The only thing CPU is saying, no articulation of what this means. It only fractured the movement. It does not mean that we do not get the interim solvency of actually being able to resolve for racial capitalism in the same, even if we don't fully over throw it. This is how we can get better over and over. This is also, you can see all the arguments that we will get better over and over, even if we fracture in the interim, which is that they do not have terminal solvency deficit against the affirmative. Second, they say mount to the spheres. One is going to be you have made no articulation of what sort of external impact. They say famine. Not true. They did not actually articulate this to famine. Second is going to be that they have conceded all the arguments from the top of the affirmative, that all of these arguments are like over-determined because they just over-determine how many people actually died in the famine in the first place, but they didn't. The third is going to be we can actually solve back this because we learn from our mistakes, which is why this sort of materialism is better, but they view time as static, which is why they cannot learn from their mistakes and always going to deck alternative solvency on the negative. All of these things mean that we have a risk of solving for capitalism. This loss rate extinction at every single impact in the round. Now, go to the alternative. First is going to be the perm do both. You have not made any altercation for why this permutation does not solve every impact in the round. First, we will win that we get permutation to extend the argument on face that they say we preempt their argument about the smallest affirmative because we are not the smallest affirmative. We are not reading a truism, but also you would, if we don't get perm, you would always win because you can read the affirmative plus the truism, which means that you all have more truisms.
You got it. You got it. This preemption is definitely not in the MG. It's extended through. We have a clean, like if the smallest possible activate should have happened in the MG, given that it was in the LOC.
The MG extends the original PMC warrant that you would get links of omission if the advocacy was small.
But also, I think arguments don't just disappear from the debate if the MG doesn't say them, but also we just extend it. Yeah.
MG erasure. All right, cool. Panel.
Even then, you can extend the links of omission arguments for why we just beat them on this question means that we should get permutation. But third, you've conceded the burdens argument, which means that we definitely get permutation to this round. Now, that means just that we all in face, so you get the permutation. Let's go to the alternative solvency. The only argument they have against the permutation is we don't solve because we are still engaging in the white civil society. No, doing both means we solve because you get outside of the white civil society by going into the ocean and doing all your solvency while we solve for capitalism within it. Also, second argument is going to be that of the Liberia warrant, which takes all sorts of alternative solvency because even if you only have, even if you resolve for all of white civil society, you still engage in mass amounts of racial violence because you create a new negation, which are the non-free people in Liberia, which is new forms of gratuitous violence against it, which you reproduce all of your ontology impacts even if we don't win framework. You want to know? Okay, cool. That means that the perm do both is clean because you can solve for capitalism and you can solve for all of their impacts. Also, you have to be alive in the first place in order to engage in going into the ocean. But if extinction kills us all, then you can't do that. Also, third is the way they don't have any empirics on when this has worked in the past, which is that we are just ahead on this question that we go to solve. Now, go to the framework. Okay, now, also they've conceded all the arguments on the alternative that capitalism does not depend on black labor, which is that even if they have 100% solvency for black labor, you are not solving for capitalism writ large. This is the root cause of it all. Capitalism is the root cause, but at least it's an alternative cause, which is that they at least reproduce their violence, but are not able to overthrow capitalism. It's like the IROS thing. That means that we have 100% solvency. Now, then they say fracturing. Two things. Where first is going to be black national liberation definitely centers blackness, which is their warrant for why Harry Haywood failed. And second is going to be the perm with business institutes means that we center black national liberation as a result of including the negative with the affirmative means that we get out of all the Harry here. What's happening? Are able to solve
Point of order. Yeah, this argument as a net benefit to the perm, saying that the permutation centers blackness, so therefore you get solvency, is definitely a new external net benefit that should have been in the
You will
MG.
say that this is an extension of the perm double line that says that the permutation resolves back for the links, or the alternative resolves this, or the alt camp resolves.
Yeah. And we would argue that the argument of fracturing is a link for why capitalism doesn't solve for black.
Panel.
Even if we're not winning any of this, we're just straight winning on the framework. First, ontology is a totalizing claim. I cannot emphasize this enough that they are completely incoherent on this question. Any counterexample is going to prove the only argument they have is that of the indigenous people, but you literally say the reason why they're not politically that is because they make deals with the government. Yes, black people also make deals with the government, which is that there is no link differential on what this actually means. That means that black people can also be politically alive, and that means that they don't have an endpoint to their impact, but extinction is the endpoint that everyone is going to die. It means that we outweigh on this question. Now, go to the weighing. First, validated life in the meantime is not an impact. If continued the continuous action of praxis solves back for validated life, even if we fracture later, black people can't get access to all the immaterial impacts of the affirmative. Because there is no validated life differential, you can only weigh on material impacts, but then extinction outweighs it just the number of people. It's a triad for the permutation on the risk of the permutation solves back for fracturing. Also, proximality is bad. Extend that all impacts are proximal to somewhere. You do not privilege debates in this round. You, in fact, you privilege people outside the round because they don't get advocates. Also, time is linear. You've conceded all of the arguments that society progresses, which is that they cannot go for any static arguments here means that we win.
Good round.